When we hear the word Messiah, we know that it's like a not a concept that we live with on a day-to-day basis. We don't every day talk about the Messiah, but we're familiar enough with the term to know what it means outside of the historical religious context that the word originates from. It's like this person who is going to come and basically solve all the problems and make everything great. And basically a divine savior. That's like the term that we know of as the word Messiah. Now, when it comes to the word Buddha, what is the Buddha? Many people equate the Buddha to the individual person, Gautama Siddhartha, and many people think of the Buddha as like a religious, like super deity that's gonna, descend from the heavens, like the Japanese Buddhism. A flavor of Japanese Buddhism has the Amitabutsu, which is basically Amita Buddha. Amita Buddha is like the future Buddha, and the future Buddha will come in the future generations when the times are dire. But I think, other than the context of historical knowledge, I think thinking about what is the Buddha as a concept, I think it can serve you a pretty practical purpose in your day-to-day life. So I wanted to talk to you today about what is not the person, what is this concept that we call the Buddha? And to understand this, we have to look at how the Buddha is a term and a concept that predated the individual Gautama Siddhartha. So, why was this concept of a Buddha already there in the Indian subcontinent? What did people mean when they said, "Oh, I wish there was a Buddha" in the back days, right? And in ancient India, like 2,600 years ago, when people wished for a Buddha, what did they really wish for? And I think a lot of it is similar to a lot of us in the contemporary days wanting a Messiah, wanting a savior, right? And so saving is kind of a very big umbrella term. So what is involved in being a savior? And interestingly enough, I think the Jewish origin of the word Messiah gives us a lot of parallels that we can understand. So, for example, we can see here, in Judaism, Messiah is a fully human, non-deity Jewish leader, physically descended via a human genetic father of an unbroken paternal Davidic line and through King David and King Solomon. He will accomplish predetermined things in a future arrival, including the unifications of the tribes of Israel, the gathering of all Jews towards Israel, and the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem, and the ushering of a messianic age of global universal peace and the annunciation of the world to come. Okay, so there are some parallels to the concept of the Buddha in here. In particular, the important distinguishing is the Buddha is not meant to be a person who is outside of the human realm, not a god. So the Buddha is meant to be a human being, and like the predetermined things in a future arrival, like the unification of tribes of Israel, right? These desires of what the Messiah will do come from the practical day experiences of what the Jewish people went through in the past. So we need to understand a little bit about what was going on in India at the time. And India is a really, 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 really big subcontinent, right? And in that subcontinent, there was always a fluctuation of power. Why that is while India is very big, there are specific parts of India that's good for agriculture. And there are parts of India that the rivers traverse, and those tend to be good for civilizations. So many civilizations form along the river, and then they eventually, when with enough power and influence, they want more. So they form a tribe, and then they go into war with other tribes to get more and more. And then one, part becomes bigger, but the other parts get small and oppressed. But then the human cycle, like history of India, is really long, right? So, yes, you get conquered by another country, but then you still hold that resentment of like, I'm gonna be independent one day, and then with enough time the independent forces come, and then the forces topple. Something like this has been going around in India for a very, very, very long time. Now, we all commonly know that the Indian culture has a lot to do with the Brahmanism, or like the Hinduism. And in Hinduism, what we know as Hinduism, we have that general understanding of the caste system, which is, hey, if I'm born of a high caste, and then my life is good, right? And if I'm born of a low, then this life I need to spend it repenting for my sins of the previous life, so that I can have a better chance at the future life, and so on. And now, in that case, if both countries, right, when two countries are at war, and both countries subscribe to their gods, and they're both very devout, then who's supposed to win this fight? Because many people thought like, oh, it's because our faith in the super powers of the gods was weak. That's why we lost the battle. And that was a common justification for losing the war, right? And when you win the war, it's like, oh, the gods have favored us. But what happens when all these wars happen, and then everybody is subscribed to the same faith? So, because of this constant fluctuation of power, because of this constant battles and wars, and because of these religious practices that were meant to deliver peace to us, and that were meant to deliver kind of happiness to us, it wasn't really doing its job, which made a lot of people wonder, what is the right way to live? And so in times of peace, people would be worrying, because we don't know when the next war is going to come, because it's so common. And it's written in many of the historical texts that in India, when you were a king, you obviously, in those times, you had lots of wives, and you had lots of children. And so one of those children will have to succeed the kingdom. And in order to be the king, they killed all of their brothers, and then eventually killed the father to guarantee the king. So even in peace, this kind of a thing was always brewing. And in war, it goes without saying, things were pretty bad. It was pretty bleak. And so in this constant fluctuation of death and life and war and turmoil, people started wishing for something, right? I, I, I wish, but we wish for what? At the time, the poor people were needless to say, they were suffering. But even the rich people, they were suffering, because you never know what's going to happen the next day. Even the people of faith and the high priests, they were also suffering. And so the central question about what this future great person will do, is the relief of suffering. And in India, because you had the chance to observe life and death so frequently compared to other cultures where they lived more in peace, they developed a lot of spirituality, because it gave them a lot of chances to reflect upon the different ways of thinking about life. So another thing that people wished for in the Buddha is, I wish somebody would guide us to what the right answer would be. And so when the Buddha, the person, when he awakened in Bodh Gaya, there was quickly the word of mouth spread. Apparently, there is a Buddha who emerged from Bodh Gaya, right? Because why? The term Buddha was already a concept that existed. And so when people learned that there was a Buddha, people flocked to the Buddha for answers. Just like how you might say, oh my God, there's a Messiah in Texas. Now people would flock to Texas, right? So, one of the things that we need to use in order to make this knowledge of more of a practical matter of to us instead of just a history lesson is Buddha is a human being. And the Buddha taught that happiness is unconditional. And everybody has the innate Buddhahood inside. But for you, what is the yearning that you have? If you were to meet a Messiah, if you were to meet the Buddha, what would you ask of them? What kind of a relief, what kind of a freedom do you seek if you were to meet this person who has great powers that can absolve all suffering? When we focus on that suffering, then we define a new kind of a relationship with our suffering. So, oh my God, this thing happened. For example, I didn't get the job I wanted, or I didn't get into the school that I wanted, and now I feel horrible, and it seems like my life is going to be doomed. And then now, suppose there is a Buddha, and the Buddha can solve this. But the Buddha is a human being. It's not going to be some divine intervention when they do a ceremony and then boom, like a lightning in my head, changes everything. The Buddha will do something. He will do something with me, and then the suffering will go away. What is it that he would do? The more time you spend being curious about what you would do, what you would ask of the Buddha if he were to emerge, or if she were to emerge. Thinking about that already prioritizes your suffering. Thinking about that, thinking along those lines already lets you know that the suffering is not absolute. There can be something that's done about it. And more, teachings later, you will eventually come to the point where you understand even I can be a Buddha. Anybody can be a Buddha. At that point, you will learn how to absolve yourself of all the sufferings. But for today, now that you understand the context of the word Buddha, the context of the concept of Buddha, I would like to invite you to think about, what would I ask of the Buddha? Especially knowing that he's not a supernatural being. She is not a supernatural being. Knowing that she is a person, he is a person. What would I ask of the Buddha?